Bible students. This is a Sunday evening Bible study. I'm Dr. Renee Milton, and today we're going to go over 1 Corinthians 7, verses 1 through 5. And if you enjoy these Bible studies, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and like this video. Well, here we are with another mini lesson on the Bible. This chapter is not that difficult to understand in the right context. If you look at my video on proof texting, you'll see that a lot of times people use scriptures in a chapter and they use it in a way to prove their belief. They're not using the Bible in a way to inform them about God's wishes for their life, but to support their own beliefs about what they feel should be the state of things. Anyway, anytime we do this type of proof texting, it does a disservice to the teaching of the Word of God. This particular book, if you go back to 1 Corinthians 1, where I give a history of the book, was written during Paul's second missionary journey, 54 AD. Politically, what was going on at the time was the ending of the reign of the Roman Emperor Claudius and the beginning of the reign of Caligula. Persecutions were there under Claudius, but they certainly may not have even been as extensive as they would begin to be under Caligula. They were on the verge of increasing at this point. So as we go to Bible scholars, and it's good to see what other people who have studied the Bible their entire life, who have studied the deep Greek and Hebrew of the Bible, have to say about these matters. Most of these commentators agree that this chapter is in response to a question. And the question has to be, is it proper for a man to marry in the present circumstances of the church? Well, this is understandable considering what was going on at the time. Now, you can't take scriptures and just erase them from their context and their surroundings. A lot of this chapter is Paul answering questions, or answering this particular question about marriage under the circumstances of persecution. He does some general talking about marriage, but you have to keep in mind that he is addressing a particular situation. The principal part of this epistle was written in answer to a lot of questions, really, that had been asked and sent to the apostle in a letter from the Corinthian church. And there are obviously questions that many of the Corinthian believers have. So little of this has to do in this chapter with across-the-board commands on anything, unless he states it. And you will see throughout this chapter that he will state, this is my command, this is the Lord's command, this is my command, because many of these things he is saying based on a particular situation, and he's giving his advice. So this is all good to keep in mind as we go through this chapter, 1 Corinthians 7. And now verses 1 through 5. Now concerning the things which you wrote, it is good for a man not to touch a woman, but because of immoralities, each man is to have his own wife, and each woman is to have her own husband. The husband must fulfill his duty to the wife, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise also, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Stop depriving one another, except by agreement for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer and come together again, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Now, right off the bat here, this word, touch, in verse number 1, needs to be explained. Now, concerning the things about which you wrote it, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Now, if we were to take that literally, that means we couldn't shake hands, we couldn't hug. But of course, when you are looking at the actual language, the word touch is haptamahi. You'll have it right here at the bottom. I always give you here at the bottom the Greek. and you can see for yourself. I also give you the link for the BibleHub.com page that explains more fully the actual meaning of the word. But in brief, the word means to fasten to or to lay hold of, to touch. But remember, in Greek, it's not always like English, and it can mean different things in different contexts. Here in 1 Corinthians 7, it's not talking about simply touching a man's hand or putting your arm around a brother or sister in comfort or something like that. It is talking about to know a woman sexually, to have sexual intercourse. So the context he is answering a question about marriage. And he's saying right off the bat, now concerning the things which you wrote me, it is good for a man not to have sexual intercourse with a woman. Now he's going to explain why he's saying that. Verse 2, because of sexual immoralities, because there you are surrounded by sexual immoralities. Don't forget that Corinthians were used to a lot of loose sexual behavior. So he tells them, because of sexual immoralities, each man should have his own wife and each woman is to have her own husband. Just imagine if you come from a culture where sexual activity is very loose. Fornication, adultery, it doesn't matter. Whatever fits the bill, whatever serves your need, go ahead and do it. Paul is trying to take them back here to what is the proper thing to do. So not only is he answering question about should we get married under these circumstances, Paul, being the great teacher, goes back and said, let me start from square one. First of all, I really wish, because of the circumstances we're under, that you didn't get involved with women sexually. Shock. But he's going to explain why he says that. So the first thing he's saying, it is really not good for a man to touch a woman sexually under these circumstances. But because of sexual immoralities, I don't want you to do things that are sinful. Get married. Each one of you should have your own wife and each one of you should have your own husband. If you need sex, and most people do, this is part of humanity. This is part of the human life, is sexuality. He said, get married. Verse number 3, the husband must fulfill his duty to his wife, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does, and likewise also the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. So he's talking very clearly about sexual relations here and how the marriage situation will satisfy your sexual needs. Verse 5, stop depriving one another, except by agreement for a time. And I can imagine, because of the context of this, that there were times people decided to just abstain because of the persecution that was going on, because of their life as Christians at the time. And he tells them, stop doing that. Don't deprive one another of sexual satisfaction, except by agreement for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer and come together again, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Now, a lot of times people think that if they get married, all their sexual needs and all their sexual problems are just automatically solved. That is not always the case. A husband and wife have to work together about sexual needs. They have to discuss the needs of one partner versus the needs of the other. So this concept, that principle is there about how to handle Christian sex life. And we shouldn't be afraid to talk about that. I remember being at a couples retreat one time, and I said sex is the most fun you can have without laughing. They laughed, but it was a very nervous laugh, and it just seemed that a lot of people at the retreat didn't really want to talk about sex openly. But this was married couples. This is what married couples do. So this first 5 verses is very helpful to us to understand what Paul is trying to get across here. In a nutshell, in these first 5 verses, Paul is saying, I wish that you didn't have to have these sexual needs. Verse 1. But since you do it the right way. Get married, and when you get married, satisfy one another sexually. And that's verses 1 through 5 in a nutshell. I'll see you next time. God bless you and have a great week.